Okay. All right. Hey, everybody. So, yeah, it's me, Mr. Culp. I did a few screencastifys at the end of last year when we switched over to distance learning and everybody was home. So, I've decided to start doing some more screencastifys because I want to save some more of our class time for class discussions or questions that you have about the material. So I'm going to put some of my lectures on these screencastifies. I'm going to let you listen to them at night in preparation for class the next day, especially as we're getting ready to do the hybrid and we're going to have kids simultaneously at home and in the classroom. I just think it might be best to have some lectures kind of recorded for you and given to you ahead of time. And that way, class time will hopefully be a little more valuable because it'll be more two-way. You asking me for clarification, asking questions, having a discussion. We can put you in breakout rooms and you guys can discuss the questions yourselves. You can discuss the material. And we're going to hope it goes from there. So this first screencastify, going to save you guys a lecture. If you go to your chapter 11, you can see my screen there. Hello. Chapter 11, Jefferson's first term, 1801, 1805. Something very important that comes up. Number 7. Did he or did he not like the way his cousin, John Marshall, ruled in the Marbury versus Madison case? So that Marbury versus Madison case is a big deal. It's not sexy in any way, but it's got teeth as far as historical relevance goes. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of walk you through. I kind of made a Google slide presentation to give you some visuals as I talk. And I'm going to leave this lecture for you here. You're going to watch it, and the next day or two, we're going to talk about it. So here we go. Jefferson's issues with the courts. Again, this Marbury versus Madison case, you got to talk a lot about a lot of things in order to contextualize it and really understand its impact in the big picture of not just Jefferson's administration, but basically the history of the Supreme Court, number one, and to some extent the history of the United States. So let's check it out. So where does it all start? Well, it's going to start with John Adams after the 1800 election, where he was running for re-election and a second term. Adams loses that election very narrowly to Thomas Jefferson and his Democratic Republican Party. And so he basically becomes what you call I'm going to have to move my screen here. I'm hoping I'm in the middle now. But I'll have to move these around as I got some visuals throughout the slides here. He becomes what's called a lame duck president. So he's not this guy right here, okay? He's not quite that kind of a lame duck. But anytime a sitting president is not elected for another term, that period of time between when the election occurs in November and when the new president takes office sometime the next year, there's that period where the sitting president, who is no longer going to be president for very long, still has to fulfill an X amount of days of his office. And they call that the lame duck period. Well, in 1801, roughly a month and a week or so after the election, Adams is going to sign the Judiciary Act, a new version of the Judiciary Act. One had been passed 12 years earlier, but he's going to sign a new one. This one is generally sort of like nicknamed the Midnight Judges Act. Oh, yeah, Midnight Judges. I remember reading about that in the textbook. Yeah, we're getting there. Where's my... There we go. Wait a minute. I went way back too far there. Where's my... Uh-oh. Let me see something here. I feel like one of my slides is... Come on. Okay. We're all right. Sorry about that. I'm going to stick you up here. I'm sticking me. Anyway, this is not a very polished video, but we're into it now, okay? And it's just for you guys, so it's all good. I can always make another one later. So, as a result of this Judiciary Act, Adams is going, and the Federalists, who are still in power, they're all lame ducks. A lot of Federalists in the House and in the Senate are also lame ducks. They're going to be replaced come the next year in March. And the Judiciary Act allows or has the executive branch create a whole lot of new judgeships. One aside to that is in 1800, late 1800, the Supreme Court justice retired due to illness. And so there was an opening for the Supreme Court Chief Justice. Long story short, John Marshall, who was sitting Secretary of State. I left you a little bit of a background on John Marshall. His name has come up here and there. I remember with the XYZ affair. And it's possible that we mentioned his name when we talked about Valley Forge. When we said, who were some of the famous people that were there. So the sitting Secretary of State, everybody who knew John Marshall had no qualms about basically saying this man is of the highest integrity, absolute highest integrity. No one could ever say that John Marshall was a liar or a cheat or something that, would lead along the lines of villainous. This guy's integrity was sky high, and even his enemies said that about him. So John Adams, probably the last major thing, probably some people say this is his greatest accomplishment after John Marshall will be on the bench for 35 years and making a lot of what are considered very good rulings on the Supreme Court. One of the last major things that John Adams does in his presidency is that he appoints John Marshall, the Supreme Court Chief Justice. He is not technically considered one of these midnight judges we're about to talk about shortly. So for our purposes right now, Adams lost the election. Thomas Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans are coming into power in two branches of government, the executive and the legislative. And in his lame duck period, John Adams appoints John Marshall, a staunch Federalist, to the High Court. All right, so let's go back to present. Sorry about the time loading there. Okay. Now, in Adams's last couple nights as president, there might be some presidents just kind of walk around the White House today and just take a stroll in parts of the Capitol and, of course, the White House where they're not going to be living as the president any longer. Now, there weren't many buildings in Washington, D.C. Remember, John Adams moved into the presidential mansion, as they called it then, as it was being built, much by slave labor, which has been a point of topic as well in the last year. He could have just kind of relaxed with Abigail and sat by the fireplace and enjoyed a nice wine and just kind of toasted about his successes and triumphs and things that they were going to do when they got home to Massachusetts. But he was a busy guy. On his last nights as president, what is he doing? He is signing and appointing all of these judges to these positions created by the Federalists under the Judiciary Act. So all of these new judgeships are getting appointees, and they're all Federalists. All of these judges that are getting appointed and all of these judgeships that are being created are basically being filled by Federalists. And that's what Adams is doing. He's a pretty busy guy in his last couple nights. He's up late night and he's filing all this paperwork. He's reading it to make sure it's all T's crossed, I's dotted. And you say to yourself, well, why is he doing that? Why is Adams doing this? All right, well, that's kind of an important question. Why is Adams doing this? Well, the Federalists have been in control for 12 years. The election of 1800 meant a huge change. So what's going to happen is the legislature was now going to be Democratic Republican. The executive branch, because Jefferson and Burr win the presidency and the vice presidency, that is now no longer Federalist. That is now under the Democratic Republicans. Why does Adams do this? Why do the Federalists do this? Well, they look at this third branch of the government and they say, hey, listen, we've got to take steps so that these Democratic Republicans who are coming into office don't completely dismantle everything we've created. And that includes the Second Bank of the United States, a lot of foreign policy, a lot of domestic laws that are put in place. And so, if I can change the color, what this act does and what these midnight judges do are basically give the judiciary a very Federalist stronghold, gives them a strength. So the Federalists will at least have one branch of government that can use its checks and balances to sort of keep these Democratic Republicans in check. That's why they do it. All right, I want to go to the next, just go to the next slide. Again, it's been a while since I used this. I'm really hoping. How do I? Somebody. Oh boy. Come on. Well, we'll have to go to this again. So, on March 4th, which was the date before the amendment changed the date up to January 20th, but the date in the olden days was March 4th. That was the day when the old president went out and the new president came in. Thomas Jefferson and his Democratic Republicans take the helm, and Thomas Jefferson named James Madison his Secretary of State. Big changeover. And we know that Jefferson didn't completely dismantle all of the Federalist institutions and policies that they had done over the first 12 years. And he himself used that term. It was a bloodless revolution. Now, it just so happens, and this is, long story short, and you don't need to know these excruciating small details, but some of the late night appointees, the midnight judges, some of them were able to get their commissions filed and processed, but not all of them were. So think of a proverbial inbox on the White House desk, and there are a bunch of judgeships that, for whatever reason, the Federalists weren't able to process in time. And so Adams sort of leaves them in the inbox for the new president, Jefferson, and his Secretary of State, Madison. Okay. And, there's Jefferson and Madison, and they sort of see the inbox and they look at this handful of judgeships and a bunch of Federalists that are awaiting their commissions. And Jefferson decides, you know what? Madison, I don't want you to do anything with this stack of papers. I don't want you to do anything with that pile whatsoever. Don't do it. Let's just see what happens. All right? We don't need any more Federalist judges controlling the judiciary, the federal judiciary, than already is. So let's not make their position even stronger by filing for the rest of these commissions. Let's just leave it here. Let's let it lie. See what happens. And it's quite possible that nothing ever would have been done about it, but that's not the way it went down. So one of the guys in this pile was a guy named William Marbury. And he is a Federalist who was appointed the Justice of the Peace for Washington, D.C., this new area created when they created D.C., all right, the federal capital. And Marbury wants to know, where's his appointment? He knows that some of the other judges have already been called, they've been processed, and some of them, I believe, started their jobs. They're getting paid by the federal government. They're making a salary. So Marbury, he starts digging, like, why haven't I got it? And he understands that Madison, whose job it is to kind of basically finish the processing of these commissions, hasn't done his job. So here's William Marbury. He just wants his job that it was basically, he thought for sure that he would get from the Adams administration. Hey, President Adams appointed me fair and square, legally. Why haven't I got my judgeship? So, move me here. He does what Americans have become known, I believe, a great deal for: suing. I'll take you to court. And maybe that's something. Maybe that says a good thing about our court system, that so many people want to take other people to court. But William Marbury is going to sue James Madison to deliver these commissions. Boom. So it's a little battle of gamesmanship here, and I think you guys can understand that a little bit. We've got a little bit of this going on right now. President Trump has basically recommended the next Supreme Court justice who will replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And there's a little gamesmanship going on right today as the Senate starts to basically listen for her confirming and hold those hearings. And there's going to be gamesmanship. They've each got their little side to play here. It is a little bit similar to today. So here it goes. But this is this court case, Marbury versus Madison. Like, okay, one guy. Why is this case so famous? It's one guy trying to get a justice of the peace job. What's the big deal? All right, fair question. Well, you would think this is a relatively simple case. And Jefferson and Madison kind of looked at this as a win-win. Either way. But that's not what happens. John Marshall kind of outsmarts them. So the Marshall-led court hears the case, and they listen to Marbury's lawyers. They listen to Madison's lawyers. All the justices listen to the case, and now it's time to deliberate. And they know that if Marshall finds for Marbury to be the winner of this case, Jefferson and Madison will still not basically process these commissions. What can the Supreme Court do? The Supreme Court doesn't have an army. They don't have any armed forces. There's not any guys with robes that carry rifles around in the 1800s. And we're the Supreme Court force. The Supreme Court can't enforce their own rulings. They don't have any military power. The president has the military at his disposition. He's the supreme, all right, he's the commander-in-chief of all the forces. So, and that would make the Supreme Court look weak. If they found for Marbury and then Jefferson and Madison just didn't basically deliver on the goods, it would make like the Supreme Court seem weak. Now, if they found for Madison, well, then Jefferson gets what he wants. These guys all don't get their commissions, and there's less Federalists on the bench. So it's sort of like a win-win. Jefferson and Madison were like, just couldn't wait to see, which half of the win do they get here. Well, Marshall found a way to outfox the red-headed Jefferson. And in doing so, established himself and the Supreme Court as big time. So what happens is the Supreme Court is going to look at the case itself. And it turns out that the Supreme Court is looking at the law. They're examining the law that Congress passed in 1789, the precursor to the Judiciary Act of 1801. So 1801 basically built, amended, and extended the power of the act that Congress passed in 1789. And examining that law, John Marshall came to reason that the Supreme Court jurisdiction over cases like these, that law passed in 1789 should have never been passed. It was an unconstitutional law. It basically, the Constitution didn't give Congress the power to pass such a law. And so what Marshall does is when he announces his decision, he basically says, hey, listen, this has come to us, and this is how anything happens with the Supreme Court. You have to bring a case to the Supreme Court. The court can't go looking for cases. You have to bring something to the Supreme Court before they can do anything with it. And now that this case is in the Supreme Court's hands, John Marshall reasons that the Judiciary Act of 1789 was unconstitutional, and he and the court strike it down. They basically, for the first time in history, the Supreme Court renders a law passed by Congress as unconstitutional. And he calls this judicial review. That's how he terms it when he explains the power that the Supreme Court has over Congress and the presidency. The Supreme Court has what he's called the power of judicial review. And if we are brought anything where a law is considered by us to be unconstitutional, we have the right to strike it down. That's what we do. We interpret laws, and we interpret this law that this case is sort of built around as being unconstitutional. Bam! Drop the mic! And you're like, excuse me. What? What are we talking about here? You may not see the connection here. You may not see how this is interpreted by Jefferson, Madison, and the rest of the Democratic Republicans. I know. It's like, so? Like, what? But again, it's how Jefferson and his Republican Democrats, or Democratic Republicans, interpreted this action. I should switch that letter back. Right? It's like the gauntlet has been thrown down. That's the way they see this. They feel like John Marshall and the Federalist-led Supreme Court has basically thrown down a gauntlet. They feel, Jefferson feels and Madison feels that this is sort of like a warning from the Supreme Court. That now that you guys are new in town, you Democratic Republicans, new to the Congress and new to the executive branch, if you think you're going to pass all these laws that completely reverse the last 12 years and you make this an agrarian nation and, basically a sole agrarian nation with like no budget, no debt, no anything, you're going to change all this stuff. You're going to completely reverse. That's not going to happen. The Supreme Court will basically strike down some of those laws. So you can go all that hard work, but if you don't stick to the Constitution, we're going to strike it away. So, Jefferson, he's not gonna just take this and go off frustrated. He and Madison and a couple key Democratic Republicans, they talk about this, and all right, what's our next move here? So they decide, Supreme Court has used a check and balance against us. Well, we'll just use one of the checks and balance against them. And so, out of just pure spite, they're going to lash back at the Supreme Court. And Jefferson is going to instruct the new Democratic Republican House and the Senate to basically go after old bacon face, as they called him. All right, Samuel Chase. And this guy, he had been on the bench since the Washington days. Washington appointed him onto the Supreme Court. And he rubbed people a lot of ways. He kind of had an abrasive way about him. And he had some very questionable behavior to a lot of people, certainly Democratic Republicans. He had a lot of idiosyncrasies, and he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. He was kind of a controversial guy. So Jefferson, going back to that, Jefferson kind of singles him out and says, okay, House, I want you to draw up the impeachment articles. And then Senate, I want you to hold the trial and impeach this guy, kick him off the court, and then send a message back to the Supreme Court and John Marshall that don't mess with me. Don't you mess with me. And so that's exactly what happened. So how'd that all kind of work out? Well, it worked out like a wet fart in church. So, try that one next Sunday and see how that goes for you. So that's a terrible analogy. I'm sorry. It basically blows up in Jefferson's face. Absolutely blows up in his face. And, we're talking 1803 was that ruling. And then this led into 1804. And then, this is going to roll into 1805. This, court proceedings aren't fast. This isn't night court where, there's going to be a ruling just like that. So the House does impeach the Supreme Court justice. It goes to the Senate for trial. And, a lot of senators look at Jefferson and go, listen, I don't like the guy, but I'm not going to go on the historical record by basically impeaching a guy who didn't break any laws or any of his oaths to uphold the Constitution on the court. He didn't break any rules. He's just, what they felt like he's just weird. He's a jerk. He's a maniacal egomaniac, whatever it might have been that they said. And senators refused to impeach him. They didn't get enough votes to impeach him. And so it didn't work. And Jefferson and Madison basically look like fools. The Supreme Court wins totally. So what's the historical takeaways? To wrap this up, Jefferson's power was checked by another branch. And the whole idea of checks and balances sort of work. Here it is, one of the early usages of checks and balances. Jefferson and Madison to some degree, but Jefferson, the executive, tried to overstep his power and the executive branch's power, and another branch, the legislature, led by his own party, basically held their own president in check, said, you can't do that. And there are a couple times in history where that's going to happen. And most of the time we have to learn about those specific things in history because they just stand out. That's why our three branches of government, I know we only see, you see the most of the president and you see a good portion of the House, but you rarely hear about the Supreme Court, although not this week because, all right, the hearings have started for Ruth Bader Ginsburg's replacement. The Supreme Court established itself as a player. Right? They showed their muscle. All right? I wish I had one to show you. But they establish and they flex their judicial review power. And they let the other two branches know, hey, we're here too. We're an equal, or at least supposed to be an equal branch. And then the last big takeaway is this will be the first of many monster decisions of the Marshall-led Federalist Supreme Court. And Marshall goes another 35 years. He's 35 years Supreme Court Chief Justice. So long after the Federalist Party even ceases to exist, they do exist on the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court kind of holds their ideals and outlook for the American people through their rulings on the court. And that's it. All right. I didn't have like a goodbye frame there. So listen, I'm not sure how long that took. I feel like it took a long time. So I'm going to stop this recording, and then you guys are going to have to ask some questions and maybe hold some discussion tomorrow, and we'll see how it all rock and rolls. All right. Until next time, hopefully a much better polished version. Okay. Now we got to hit stop. Oh boy.